Come with me to a magical place where being labeled the Pork Queen is a compliment, where being nice is just a way of life, and where all leaders of the free world must pass through. Welcome to Iowa. Whether you're a current Iowan, an Iowa expat, or an Iowan at heart, this show is for you. This is the Iowa Podcast. Real Iowans, real talk, no drama. If you're a train fan, you're in luck. Spring has sprung, summer is here, and train fans, all you need to do, no matter where you are in the state, is head over to Boone, Iowa, and talk with my buddy Mike Wendel, the museum director for, and let me get this right, let me get this right, Mike, the
Sure.
James H. Andrew Railroad Museum and History Center director. Did I get all that right?
That is correct.
Thanks,
Or just the James H. Andrew Railroad Museum.
Thanks for coming on this show, Mike. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
So let's get started. For those that don't know, they may not entirely be familiar with the fact that Boone has a historic railroad. So can we start really broadly by, take a 30-second or maybe 1-minute elevator pitch and just give everyone the whole rundown of what the Boone Scenic Valley Railroad even is. I think that's a good starting point.
Okay. Basically, it's the last remnants of what was called the Fort Dodge, Des Moines, and Southern Electric Interurban Railway. It was incorporated on February 16th, 1906. Before that was started, there was a line that ran steam engines out of the Des Moines River Valley called the Newton and Northwestern Railroad. And that ran for some years, and that started in the 1880s. And then as electrical generation, the Thomas Edisons of this world and others started with electric train travel, which was the latest rage in turn of the century, the Fort Dodge, Des Moines, and Southern began in 1906, and it grew to become the longest interurban. When I say interurban, that means between cities, interurban line in all of Iowa. It's 85 miles long between Des Moines and Fort Dodge, linked the coal and agricultural regions of western Iowa, and many branches increased the total route of this electrified railroad to 150 miles. It was the longest electrified railroad in all of Iowa. And there was, on our line, there are two bridges. One that goes over what's called the Bass Point Creek. It's called the Bass Point Creek Trestle. Was built in 1912. There was a wooden one that was built before that. It's 784 feet long and 156 feet tall. And it is the longest and highest electric interurban bridge in all of the United States. It's part of our line. There was a wooden one that was built in the 1880s for the Newton Northwestern. When they were bought out by the Fort Dodge line, they put a steel bridge there. The other one flooded and had problems, and it wasn't being made out of wood. It wasn't going to last, and it didn't really. It was there for about 10 years or so.
Wow.
Actually, more like 15 years. But so the new one was built by the American Bridge Company at a cost of $100,000. It's still there today. It's in a wonderful shape. It's rated for, I think, about 6 times the heaviest that any of us can put across it in the way of locomotives and passenger cars. So they always overbuilt these things in those days. So there are two bridges on there. There's another one called the Des Moines River Bridge, and that is lowered and just is over the river itself.
Now,
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, this is actually a lot longer than I thought it was. It sounds like, because how much of it is dedicated to the actual Boone Scenic Valley Railroad? Because it's entertainment too. How much of that section is actually the entertainment and the dinner and all the themed rides?
Okay, well, in terms of mileage, we go about 8 miles out of 11 miles out on our line, and so that is our, if you want to call it, our excursion section.
Oh yeah, that's a good word. Yeah.
Yeah, we do have shipping and receiving in terms of having business on what we call the East End. It's actually called the East End Railroad, and so that is actually we service PDM and Ag Certain here in town on the east side of town, And so basically what we do is we end up bringing cars to the main line where the Union Pacific is at. And so we have a regular freight business, but then the length of the railroad is devoted to passenger service. And so that's what the public sees.
Yeah, so you're running freight, like business use, and then also like recreational use on that same 10 or so miles of track. Is that right?
Well, actually, in a manner of speaking, east of Story Street here in Boone is where you're going to see the shipping end of things, and that stays away from the passenger end of things. And then west of our depot, or northwest, I should say, of our depot, going down to a little town of Fraser, which there's not much of it today. It was an old coal mining town, is where our passenger service goes. And that's where it's really, really scenic. And that's where folks really, really get into it, because getting out in the country like that and seeing the Des Moines River Valley, and some people that live out this way have never been in the Des Moines River Valley, is absolutely beautiful. The eagle population is fairly large there. It's doing very well. And the nice thing about that is if you like nature and you like to get out on a train, we have different types of passenger cars. So there's a regular fee for that. And we have what's called a transfer caboose, which is called the Valley View, where you can actually sit on benches and there's no top to it. So you can actually be seated in this special car. It's
that's
more
cool.
than the other ones. Yeah, and so you can actually go across these bridges, and so it's just wonderful. And so that books up right away with Valley View. But it's worth it too.
Yeah, so, I want to talk about go back to the original purpose a little bit. But since you're talking about the scenic aspect of the train ride, it's really helpful here to paint that picture for people who haven't been there, because you're talking about it's scenic, it's in a valley, it goes over some bridges. But these aren't little, 10, 20-foot bridges over a creek. These are massive bridges, and it's a huge valley. And the topography, for those that haven't been up in that area, I'm obviously close to the Boone area is where the ledges are. And the topography up there is quite striking. It's incredible. People always talk about Iowa being flat. All you need to do is take one ride on the Boone Scenic Valley Railroad.
Well, the neat thing about the valley, and I'm actually from the Chicagoland area, so I came out here as a tourist in 1996, and little did I realize I'd be living out here, and much less running a museum. But the neat thing about the Des Moines River Valley is that a lot of people don't realize it. If you go back eons, there were 3 ice ages that came down from the Arctic down to this area.
Right.
At one time, there was this glaciated lobe that came down. Imagine a glacier over a mile high, and they've calculated the weights of glaciers. It's in the trillions of tons, the amount of ice that it's just like a big scoop, and it's heavy. And it takes, months, if not years, to dig through an area. But the Des Moines River Valley was flat at one time. And so the last 10,000 years was the time that really did it. And it carved out the valley to a depth of 200 feet.
Wow.
Before that, if you go way back in time, there was a sort of a Pennsylvania coal forest there. When I saw the Pennsylvanian era, I should say, it has nothing to do with the state of Pennsylvania, but and so there was a lot of deposits of basically forests and things before that died out and then became coal and compressed and so on. And so in the 1870s and 80s, the region became known for coal mining. So the little town of Fraser, which exists today, population not very high, but a lot of people came from different countries to go and work in the coal mines there. And so that's where that Newton Northwestern came from. And then when the Fort Dodge line bought them out and brought this new technology of electric train travel, then that really became something that really changed things a lot.
So it wasn't, when it was originally designed, obviously, it wasn't electric. It would have been steam back then, correct?
Exactly.
And then
yes.
it was converted. These lines were converted to like, how does that work?
Okay. Well, the interesting thing about that is that they were brilliant in their own way. The Fort Dodge line invested $2.4 million to build a coal-fired plant. Here they had all these resources of coal in the Des Moines River Valley, And so they figured that once Thomas Edison had invented, the idea of generating electricity, through burning of coal, basically what you do is they had these big blast ovens where they burned coal and it turned turbines, and the turbines generated electricity, and electricity sent the current out, and it was alternating current because Edison's DC current wouldn't travel as far as alternating current. And what they did was they had booster buildings where they would boost the power after a certain amount of miles.
Wow.
It'd have to be reboosted up again. And so the neat thing about that, having it near the Des Moines River Valley, the Des Moines River itself, I should say, is that they thought, and they just didn't know at the time, they thought they could take advantage of the river itself, the Des Moines River, and use it as almost hydroelectric wise. The only thing, and I think a lot of people realize that the Des Moines River is, you can't count on it like that. I mean, it'll either be too dry and you could almost walk across it, or it'll flood for miles.
Oh, okay.
So that's what the problem was, is that this massive coal-fired plant with two chimneys that were over 300 foot tall, it flooded 3 times. And so the Fort Dodge line had a real problem on their hands. They had these giant dynamos that were under 15, 20 feet of water. And they had put up with it twice. And the third time they decided that they were going to give up on the idea of generating that. And so you can go in that route. And so the Fort Dodge line went from electric to diesel. And so actually, you know what? They actually, at the very beginning, they had actually a couple of steam engines, but they soon got into like electric train travel and so on. So the Fort Dodge line was doing great during the teens, 20s. They suffered a little bit during the Depression. The war years happened. And believe it or not, they still were able to run electric even without the power plant. They're still able to do it to a certain level. And the last electric trolleys, we've got photos of them. They would run until, in limited areas, until the 1950s. The last,
wow,
it's pretty fascinating.
Well, some of those even ran in downtown Des Moines. I don't know if those lines were, do you know if those lines were connected at all?
Yeah, they actually went down just west of the Capitol building. And so where you see today, there's actually, I think DART was running a transfer bus that went down from Boone, down 35 down to Des Moines.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, they did that up until a couple of years ago. I don't know if they're still doing that or not, but basically the Fort Dodge line went from, you could have actually taken it from Des Moines up to Webster City, and you could have taken it as far west as Rockwell City and as far southeast as Newton, Iowa. And so there was this massive 150-mile long line. And so it was doing well, but then other years it wasn't. And then what happened was in 1968, the Chicago Northwestern, who wanted the clients that were on there because they serve as grain elevators, they wanted the list of clients. They thought they could make a lot of money at that. So they bought the line in 1968, but only after a person who, there was a scrap dealer that bought it and decided to start ripping up some of the rail. He thought if he couldn't make some money on parts of the line, he would take up the rail. It ended up that the Northwestern did the same. So they started lifting up the rail. And so suddenly it was getting smaller and smaller and smaller until it's what we have today. And basically,
got it.
And so that's what happened. And so in 1982, it actually came up for auction. And the whole line itself, entirely, what was left of it was about 11 miles. And that was brought up at auction, and that it was for sale for $50,000. And 2,254 people in Boone raised the money, put their money into it, and then ended up raising the money to save what was left of the line, because they saw the bridges, they saw how pretty it was, and they thought, what a great idea to be able to open something like this for the public. And so from that point on, from 1983 on, we just celebrated our 40th anniversary a year ago.
Wow.
We have been running excursions and shipping freight.
And so back then, some people were aware because it was mostly commercial use, or was there back then? Was there transportation of individuals?
Well, there was
A little bit. Okay,
if you go back to the 50s or so, I know a lady who's in her 90s now who used to go to school in Boone. She lived out in Boxholm, Iowa, and she would take the interurban into Boone to go to school and go back at night. So every day she went across the Bass Point Creek Trestle.
So some people were very aware of how beautiful that route is. And so when it was kind of being threatened to shut down, that's why a lot of people started raising money to save it. Was the original goal then, when they were raising money to save it, was the original goal to turn it into a recreational and entertainment kind of venue? Was that the purpose?
That's right. Yeah. They thought that would be a way to keep the line. And what a shame to literally take out two bridges. There were at one time, I understand, in Iowa, there was 40 separate bridges for various reasons in use between the Newton and Northwestern across parts of the Des Moines River Valley. All those were taken out. These were the last several bridges, aside from the Kate Shelley Memorial Bridge, which is still there, the old one and the new one. And so, but most of them had been taken out. So locally, the public had the foresight to think that maybe there's a way we could save this and turn it into something that the public can enjoy. And was the beginning of the Boone Scenic Valley Railroad.
So obviously there was a process early to convert from electric to the diesel lines. But and I also actually want to ask about the process to convert it to recreational, because I'm sure there was a process for that too. It probably wasn't cheap. So first, let's talk about the process from converting it to electric and diesel. Did all those power stations, all that stuff have to be yanked out? Was there like a electric wire or something running above? All that stuff had to be removed, or was it more straightforward than that?
That's right. They had to be removed. The rail was taken up and sold as scrap. They were square buildings, about some of them are like 25 by 15 or so. They're all gone, unfortunately. There's only 3 original buildings left from the Fort Dodge line. There's one downtown in Des Moines. I don't know if it's a law office or it's a building that exists. That was one of their buildings. There's basically another one on Story Street in Boone. We're actually in the process of right now restoring it to look like it did when it was running.
Oh, that's cool.
That was moved there, and that was actually turned into a house. It was purchased from actually at that time it was purchased from the Chicago Northwestern, I believe, and moved to Ames and used as a house. And then later it was originally in the Pier, Iowa. And then later on, it was, I don't know how because this is way before my day, they ended up moving it to Boone. They bought it or got it as a donation from the family and moved it to Boone. And it's on Story Street. And so now we're actually in the middle of putting in vertical windows, just like there would have been in those days. And so as we're actually making it look, it was gutted because it was used as a house. And now we put, all of our different volunteers are working on putting that all together so that it can be a stop on our trolley. We do run a trolley on Saturdays during our regular season. It's the Charles City 50 trolley, and that is a stop on there. That'll be a stop.
So wait, you run the scenic railroad and the trolley on the same lines?
Yes.
Oh wow.
The trolley goes east, and our diesel run and steam. We actually have steam too. That goes west, and then our trolley goes east on Saturdays during regular season. So that's how we avoid that.
In 1983, you mentioned that's when the process started to convert it to like entertainment. In the process, was it the local city or was it an association that bought the railroad?
We formed the Iowa Railroad Historical Society. It's a 501c3 nonprofit, and that's our overarching nonprofit that runs everything. So
okay, got it. Yeah.
We generate monies because there's maintenance involved, and there's nothing cheap about running a railroad.
I can't imagine.
There's maintenance involved in just keeping track of. So that's why we have shipping, that we do that.
Sure.
And that's why we also have passengers. So it supports our mission of keeping this whole thing alive for the
So
for
the
future
shipping
generations.
functions fund the recreational, or that 11 to 10 miles of recreational rail, essentially.
Right. And the other function of the shipping end of things is that we have actually employees that their jobs are part of all that. So
Sure, makes sense.
the places on the east side of town rely on that. So it's important to do that. So we do that also.
What
and it
was the
supports our mission.
process in 1983 when it was purchased and when the nonprofit started, to take ownership, basically? What was the process to convert it and get it ready for recreational? Was there a lot of repairs that had to be made? Did you have to, because they were getting ready to tear it out. So were there some things that weren't maintained and you had to go back through? And how much did that cost? And what did that look like?
It costs over the years, it cost millions of dollars to do that. It did need work. I understand, although I was never here, but I understand that in Boone at the time, before they purchased it, that there was grass growing up during all the rails. It really was kind of on its way out, really. And so there a lot of money had to be put in. We're a volunteer-driven organization, so a lot of volunteers for many years, and we still have a few of the original volunteers that were here then, and so had put in enormous amounts of time. And as the years went on, we were able to purchase track equipment, hydraulic equipment, and things like that. But in those earliest of days, money had to be raised, for just basic getting it back into safety, situation.
When they made like the updates and repairs on the bridges, was it very difficult to maintain like the historical significance? Was I don't know what question I'm asking here, or I guess I should say, I don't know how to phrase this correctly, but was it difficult to maintain the historical accuracy of those bridges when they were updating them?
No, actually, it just like the Bass Point Creek Trestle built in 1912 looks exactly as it did then. Nothing's been changed in that. I mean, there was concrete work and things like that done on the footings and things, but it was when they built those bridges. What they did in those days is they made a sort of a A-frame on the ground. And then what they would do, and this is how other bridges were built, they would have rail that would go out on a kind of a ledge, and then they would take hydraulic or cranes, actually in those days, steam cranes, would pull all these A-frames up into place and bolt them in. So, and an A-frame structure is super strong to begin with. And there's many of these A-frames that make up that bridge. Is this 784 feet long, 156 feet tall Bass Point Creek Trestle. And so they just don't build things like that anymore. And in fact, I think there was a grant for $1 million just for the bridge at the time. It just needed to be looked over just for that. So, and that was many years ago. And so, but we keep all that up, and the FRA, it's Federal Railroad Administration, comes and they check everything all the time. And so, and that's, we have to pass inspection with everything. We have a certified program for volunteers. So if a person wants to be a volunteer and say run a locomotive, they can go through our training program, and then they are tested, and then they are that person goes out with seasoned people that do this, and over time they learn, to run locomotives and things like that. So we're always hoping to find people that'll be in the cars and run as conductors and brakemen and so on. So
hold on a second. Wait, so you can sign up as a volunteer to actually be the conductor of these trains, and you guys will put them through the training, get them certified, do all that stuff. This is something an Iowan can do.
That's correct.
That's amazing.
It's
that's amazing.
It's intense, but it's worth it. That's how we run. We are really 90% volunteer driven. We have 10 people on staff, but for the most part, we are run by volunteers. And that's how a lot of different excursion railroads are.
How long? I know I'm asking. I know all the train enthusiasts in the audience. I know every single one of them who just lit up when you said that is wondering, How long does this process take until I can start driving this or I don't even know if you call it driving, running the train? How long does the training take? Is this a one season kind of thing? What does this process look like?
It depends on the person. It depends on their time frame. It depends on the people that'll take them out for what we call check rides and things like that. But they'll be, tested and made sure that they understand everything there is to know about all that. Because, after all, they're running a diesel locomotive across, this is the real thing.
Right. Yeah.
And they've been doing that since 1983 here. And it's been really, really successful. And people really enjoy doing it. We have, I think one of our volunteers comes from St. Louis, Missouri. So he'll come up for, say, a week or so. And so they come from all over Iowa. They come from all over the Midwest. But we're always looking for more.
My favorite, because I've been on it years ago. And my favorite part is when you're going over a bridge and it's like a really high bridge and there's scenery underneath it. Sadly, you don't get to see a lot because they have to build these high barriers. They have to make bridges wide because drivers are kind of terrible. You know what I mean? Drivers have a difficult time keeping it within the lanes, so they can't exactly have like scenic opportunities on bridges. Trains, however, have tracks. They don't, you don't get a swerve all over the road. So it's incredible once you get up to one of these valleys and all of a sudden the ground that was right next to you is just gone. And you can't really see the tracks because they're underneath you. And the bridge, you could kind of see the bridge if you would tilt your head way out, I guess. But it's just this incredible experience where you feel as if suddenly you're flying, doing this low, slow flight over this valley. It's something else.
It is. And for those that are not afraid of heights, although either way you go, whether it's, we have folks that are on our property called rail explorers, and you may have heard of them. We have 1,000-pound track bikes, as they're called, and they're electric assisted. So say, for example, you wanted to go across the Bass Point Creek Trestle, but you want to do it on the rail bike. And so you can do that. And so we've been running.
No way.
I think, this past year, I think there were 20,000 people that did that.
That is
and
cool.
So it's really, really neat. And so they have been doing this all over. We've been running it now for year and a half now, and we started. They started like August of a year and a half ago or so, and they had something like 8,000 or 9,000 people that had ridden on these. So I was one of the first people to test the bikes out, and when we were deciding whether to do this, and it's been unbelievably successful. Now there's literally months of waiting to get to do that.
I'm looking at. Because you mentioned rail bike. I had never heard of a rail bike before. So I'm actually looking at it right now. This is legit a bike that runs on a rail. This is actually what you're talking about, right? There's like actual pedals and, it looks like people are sitting side by side. This is what you're talking about?
Right.
So you can ride this over those bridges?
You can. And
that is wacky. That looks incredible.
So exciting. It really is.
Oh my word.
It's the Rail Explorers has, I think they've got like 4 or 5 locations now across the country. And their most booked trip for rail bikes is at the Boone Scenic Valley Railroad because people
I can't imagine.
Like the thrill of going across that bridge. So you will be able to see the bridge on both sides because you're on a bike like that.
Yeah, and so I'm assuming people are like seat belted in or something.
Yeah, you're seat belted in, and you go through a safety briefing.
Yeah, wow, wow.
And they've had people as old as 100 years old that have done it.
Yeah,
and younger people too. So it's really wonderful, and they're listed on our website.
Do you have like a e-bike version as well for people that maybe their knees aren't quite what they used to be?
Yeah, like my knees, for example. I've had one knee replacement. I'm going to have to have my other one knee. But the good thing about this is that it's balanced. There are bearings in these wheels, and the bike is heavy, but you wouldn't know it but by being on it. And there's a motor assist, electric motor assist. So you don't have to be a RAGBRAI person to do it. There's people of all healths and ages, and it's really, really popular.
That's incredible. So just the last minute remaining, can you just kind of give us a rundown of all the activities? I know that it's the oldest dinner train in Iowa. There's a museum. Just our last minute, can you give us a quick rundown of everything that the Boone Scenic Valley Railroad has?
Sure. Okay, we have a 9,000 square foot museum that's got all sorts of artifacts, displays, interactive. We have a theater and a library, a railroad library. We run steam, diesel, and electric. We have rail bikes, as I was mentioning. We have special events that go on through the year, whether it be Valentine's Day or Sunset Barbecue dinner trains or Easter Bunny Express or our day out with Thomas. We have the Thomas's train every year in September, pumpkin trains and Santa Express trains and so on. And it's all on our website. And so that's the great thing about that. And there's just so many different ways you can go about this. And all these rides, by the way, you can get into the James H. Andrew Railroad Museum for free if you ride these rides. Otherwise, it's $8 a person to get in and less for kids.
And go ahead and give that website out. I'm assuming that's where people go to book tickets and that kind of thing.
Okay, now the Rail Explorers has their own website.
Oh, interesting.
www.railexplorers.net, and the Boone and Scenic Valley has we have our website called www.bsvrr, B as in boy, Sam as in Victor, or Sam as in S as in Sam, V as in Victor, R as in Railroad, and R as in Railroad.com. BSVRR for Boone and Scenic Valley Railroad.
That's railexplorers.net and BSVRR.com. And for those listening or driving, please, please, please do not try to write that down. We will put that at iowapodcast.com. If you check within the next week or so, it's going to be right at the homepage, right at the top. So very, very easy to find. Mike Wendel, the museum director of the James H. Andrew Railroad Museum and History Center, thank you so much for coming on the Iowa Podcast. I really appreciate it. I know the listeners do too.
Thanks, Justin. Pleasure to be here.
And to my fellow Iowans, Iowa expats, and Iowans at heart, thanks for listening and subscribing to the Iowa Podcast.